Now, in order to understand a country or a culture, we have to look at its people, how they think and feel, and their norms and culture. And in this series of videos, I'm going to try to talk a little bit about American identity. What are Americans like? And before we start, I find it extremely important to mention that remember that the US is a nation of immigrants. It means that people from all over the world have come to live in the United States. Also, the 50 states themselves are in many ways very different. So, in short, the United States is a nation of great diversity. So this means that to talk about an American identity, or what's typically American, is always a generalization. Now, however, having said that, Americans are of course colored by the culture in which they live, and they share some traits, values, and norms. And it is this shared mentality and way of thinking that we can refer to as an American identity. And that's what I'm going to try to look at now. Now, having said that, I'm going to look at some basic principles that to me are very American. I'm going to start with freedom and talk to you about why freedom is so essential and so important to Americans. Then we'll talk about the frontier spirit. Here I have included a lot of qualities that Americans think are important qualities. I'll talk about abundance, then we'll talk a little bit about volunteer work, about diversity, and last we'll talk about patriotism, which to many people is very typically American. All right, so let's start by talking about freedom. Now, most Americans would say that freedom is an essential part of being an American and living the American experience. And by that they mean freedom from too much government interference, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom to live as you please and to create your own life. And why is this typically American? Well, because the United States was the first country in the world to have a written democratic constitution and to offer a list of human rights, basic rights to its citizens. So we have to go back to history and to see that freedom is in fact a basic principle on which the nation was founded. It started, if you want, with the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, who later became the third president of the United States. The Declaration is a spectacular document, not only because it declares freedom or independence from the largest empire in the world, but also because of the views that are presented. The Declaration of Independence states that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. It continues that all people are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And one may argue, of course, that in America, as in Europe and the rest of the world, all people were not equal. Blacks weren't included, Native Americans were certainly not regarded as equals, but the idea that all men are created equal, that all men should be able to govern themselves through a democratic system of government was quite revolutionary and extraordinary in world terms. Now, later, after having won the war against Great Britain, the United States wrote the Constitution, the first written democratic constitution in the world. And notice that it starts with "we the people." It is a basic principle in the United States that authority shouldn't be too strong and that a nation should, of course, be governed by the people, the basic principle of democracy. Notice that 2 years after the Constitution was written, many Americans felt that the rights of the individuals had not really been taken care of, that the Constitution told us how the country should be governed, but it had left out maybe the most important part, taking care of individual rights. So 2 years after the Constitution was written, the Bill of Rights was written. It is, in fact, a list of rights for the individual, a human rights list, if you want. Now, the Bill of Rights ensures basic rights to the citizens of the new nation. It ensures the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, and also the freedom of religion, among other things. And Americans are extremely proud of the Bill of Rights. It limits the power of the authority and gives freedom and power to the individual. So to sum up, freedom to Americans is not only a very important privilege in life, it is actually the basic principle on which the nation was founded. Now, as an end note, I would just mention that a lot of people are critical to the United States, and they're skeptical to the fact that the United States is said to represent freedom and equality. And in many ways, the United States could be criticized for foreign affairs, strategies, international conflicts over the years. But there's one thing that we cannot take away, and that is the fact that the United States was the first democratic nation in the world, and that they promised freedoms and rights to people that did not exist anywhere else in the world. Americans are, of course, very proud, and they have good reason to be, of the very principles on which their nation was founded.